5 years ago, Alpha King Silas Blackwood exiled Seraphina Hart to erase his shame, convinced by a doctor's claim that she was a barren, genetic dead end. She left with nothing but the clothes on her back and a secret growing inside her that he never bothered to notice. Now, his invitation to his new son's naming ceremony is nothing more than a cruel attempt to summon a broken woman to kneel before his throne. But Silas has severely underestimated her. Seraphina isn't returning to beg. She is returning with the one thing he can never deny, the true Alpha Heir. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime stick harder. Seraphina was closing up the small floral shop she owned, the Wild Rose, when the courier arrived. He wasn't a regular mailman. He drove a matte black Range Rover with tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that screamed money and violence in equal measure. She knew who sent him before he even stepped out. She could smell the ozone and pine scent of the obsidian pack clinging to his leather jacket. It had been 5 years, but her wolf, dormant and wounded as she was, bristled under her skin. "Seraphina Hart?" the courier asked. He was young, a beta she didn't recognize. He held out a thick envelope made of cream-colored cardstock, sealed with black wax. The crest of the Blackwood family, a wolf with a crown of thorns, was stamped into it. "That's me," she said, her voice steadier than her hands. "Delivery from Alpha King Silas Blackwood. Hand-delivered only." She took it. The paper felt heavy, like holding a brick. As the courier drove away, disappearing into the grey drizzle, she didn't open it immediately. Seraphina locked the shop door, flipped the sign to closed, and sat on a stool behind the counter, staring at the wax seal. 5 years ago, that crest had been her life. She was 21, the fated mate of Silas Blackwood, the most feared alpha on the West Coast. They were supposed to be the power couple of the century, but after 6 months of trying for an heir with no success, Silas had dragged her to the pack doctor, a man named Doctor Sterling. She remembered the cold gel on her stomach. She remembered the look Silas gave her, not of love, but of calculation. And she remembered Sterling's voice, dry as dust. "Her womb is hostile. Alpha, she is barren. She will never give you a pup." That night, Silas didn't scream. He didn't hit her. He did something worse. He looked at her with absolute indifference, as if she were a car with a blown engine. "I cannot have a queen who ends my line. Seraphina," he had said, pouring himself a scotch. Rejection is a kindness. It frees you to find someone less demanding. "Leave tonight." He rejected her in his office, signed the papers, and had his guards escort her to the territory line. He didn't even watch her walk away. Her hands shook as she broke the wax seal now. Inside was an invitation, embossed in gold leaf. "The Alpha King Silas Blackwood and Queen Isabella request the honor of your presence at the naming ceremony of their firstborn son and pack heir, Lucas Blackwood, Saturday, the 20th of October, the Blackwood Estate, Aspen." There was a handwritten note clipped to the bottom. She recognized the jagged, aggressive handwriting immediately. "Seraphina, come and see what a real queen looks like. Come see the future you couldn't give me. I've granted you temporary clearance to enter pack lands. Don't be a coward. Silas, it wasn't an invitation. It was a summons to a public execution of her dignity. He wanted to show her off as the broken ex, to elevate his new wife, Isabella. He wanted to prove he was right to discard her. Serafina felt a tear slide down her cheek, hot and angry. She crumpled the note in her fist. "Mom." The voice was small, sleepy, and came from the back room of the shop. She spun around, wiping her face instantly. Standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes, was a 4-year-old boy with messy dark hair and eyes that weren't just brown, they were gold, molten, shifting gold. "Hey, baby," she said, her voice softening. "Did I wake you?" "I smelled the bad man," he said, wrinkling his nose. He smelled like burnt wood. Her son, Leo. Silas had rejected her on a Tuesday. She found out she was pregnant the following Friday, 3 days after settling into a cheap motel 3 towns over. Doctor. Sterling had been wrong. Or he had lied. She looked at Leo. He was the spitting image of Silas, but with her softness around the mouth. And he was strong. Even at 4, he could lift boxes of soil that grown men struggled with. He had an aura, a presence that made stray dogs lay down when he walked past them in the park. Silas wanted her to come see his heir. He wanted to mock her barren womb. A cold, hard resolve settled in her chest. It was a dangerous feeling. "Leo," she said, walking over and crouching down to look him in the eye. "How would you like to go on a trip to the mountains?" Leo's golden eyes widened. "Are we going to find the wolves?" "Yes," she whispered, smoothing his hair. "We're going to see the wolves, and we're going to meet someone very important." She wasn't going there to beg. She wasn't going there to cry. She was going to walk into his ballroom, wearing a dress the color of fresh blood, holding the hand of the son he threw away. She was going to burn his little celebration to the ground. Preparing to return to the Obsidian Pack wasn't just about packing a suitcase. It was about preparing for war. She had spent the last 4 years building a quiet, safe life. She went by the name Sarah Collins. She paid her taxes, arranged flowers, and raised a boy who could accidentally crush a doorknob if he wasn't careful. Serafina sat at her kitchen table, the invitation glaring at her. She needed help. She couldn't walk into the Blackwood estate alone. She needed a buffer. She dialed a number she hadn't called in years. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "This line is for emergencies only." "Hello, Dominic," she said. Silence stretched on the other end. Dominic was Silas's estranged older brother. He had left the pack politics years ago to run a security firm in Chicago. He was a rogue by choice, a man who hated the hierarchy that Silas worshipped. He had always been kind to her, in his rough way. "Serafina." His voice dropped an octave. "You're alive. The rumors said you died in the winter of 19. I'm alive, and I've been invited to the naming ceremony." Dominic snorted, a harsh sound. "Silas is a sadist. He just wants to twist the knife. Don't tell me you're actually going." "I am, but I need an escort, and I need protection. Protection from what Silas won't kill you. He just wants to humiliate you." "Protection for my son," she said. The silence this time was deafening. "Your son you adopted." "No, Dominic, I didn't adopt. He has gold eyes, and he growls in his sleep." She heard the sound of a glass shattering on the other end. Dominic swore softly. "He's Silas's. He's mine," she corrected sharply. "Silas gave up his rights when he threw us out. But yes, he is of the bloodline." "I'm on the next flight," Dominic said, the click of a gun being checked audible in the background. "I'll pick you up. We drive in together. If Silas sees the boy without warning, he'll tear the place apart. Dominic arrived in a silver SUV that looked like a tank, dressed up as a luxury car. He looked older, a scar running through his left eyebrow, but his eyes were kind when they landed on Leo. Leo sat in the back seat, clutching his toy wolf. He stared at Dominic with intense curiosity. "He feels like thunder," Leo whispered to Serafina as they buckled in. "That's your Uncle Dominic," she said. Dominic looked at her in the rearview mirror as they hit the highway. "He's an alpha. Serafina, even at this age, I can feel the command radiating off him. How have you kept him hidden?" "Supplements," she explained. "Wolf's bane in microdoses to mask his scent, and we live in the middle of a human city. The smog covers the rest. You stopped the suppressants today. Yes, if we are doing this, we are doing it right. I want Silas to smell him before he sees him." The drive was long. As they crossed the state lines and the landscape shifted from the rainy gray of Seattle to the crisp, golden aspens of Colorado, her anxiety spiked. The Blackwood estate was a fortress. It was where she had fallen in love and where she had been destroyed. She looked at Leo. He was sleeping now. He didn't know that the man they were visiting was the Bade Man. From her stories, the villain who rejected the princess. "Why now?" Dominic asked quietly, the road humming beneath them. "Why go back? You're free." "Because he sent that letter," she said, staring out the window at the passing trees. "He thinks I'm Barren. He thinks he won. If I don't go, he'll spend the rest of his life thinking I'm a failure. And worse, if Leo's wolf fully wakes up when he turns 5, I can't hide him anymore. He needs to know where he comes from, even if we don't stay." "And the Queen Isabella?" Serafina stiffened. Isabella had been her friend back then, a high-ranking she-wolf, the daughter of a neighboring alpha. She was the one who recommended Dr. Sterling. She was the one who held Serafina's hand when she cried about not getting pregnant. All while Serafina suspected now waiting to take her place. "Isabella's a snake," she said, "and I intend to cut off her head. Metaphorically." Dominic chuckled grimly. "Ideally." We arrived in Aspen as the sun was setting on Friday. The town was buzzing. The Alpha King's ceremony was effectively a royal wedding for the supernatural world. Luxury cars lined the streets, the scent of different packs, territorial, musky, aggressive was heavy in the air. They checked into a hotel on the outskirts, away from the main pack house. "Tomorrow," Dominic said, handing her a key card. "We go in at 7 p.m. The ceremony starts at 8. She spent that night grooming Leo. She cut his hair, trimming the unruly curls into a neat style that mirrored his father's. She dressed him in a miniature tuxedo. She had custom-ordered deep velvet blue. For herself, she pulled out the dress. It wasn't white or black. It was a deep, shimmering crimson, the color of a challenge. It was backless, fitted to show that her body hadn't been ruined by grief, but honed by survival. She looked in the mirror. The girl who left 5 years ago was soft, pleading, and weak. The woman staring back had eyes like cold steel. "Mummy, you look like a queen," Leo said, standing on the bed. "No, baby." She smiled, putting on her diamond earrings, the only thing she had kept from her old life, bought with her own money. "Tomorrow, we're going to show them that a queen doesn't need a king." But deep down, a terrifying thought gnawed at her. What if Silas tried to take him? What if the pull of the mate bond, which Silas had rejected, but she had never successfully severed, was still there? She went to sleep with a knife under her pillow. The Blackwood estate was less of a house and more of a monument to ego. As Dominic steered the SUV up the winding driveway, flanked by ancient pines and burning torches, Serafina felt the familiar weight of the pack's atmosphere pressing down on her. It was a physical sensation, the sheer density of alpha power gathered in one place. "Remember," Dominic said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, "you are not a pack member anymore. You are a guest. That gives you diplomatic immunity, technically, but Silas doesn't care much for technicalities." "I know," she replied, smoothing the velvet lapel of Leo's tiny tuxedo. Leo was wide awake, his nose pressed against the glass. "So many wolves," Leo whispered. "They smell like wet dirt and copper. Those are the guards." "Baby," she said, "stay close to Uncle Dom." Valets in white gloves opened the car doors. The moment her heel hit the pavement, she felt eyes on her. The paparazzi were penned behind velvet ropes near the entrance, cameras flashing like lightning. They were here to photograph the happy couple and their miracle baby. They weren't expecting the exiled ex-mate. A hush rippled through the press line as she stood to her full height. The crimson dress did exactly what she intended. It clung to her curves like a second skin, the slit riding high up her thigh, revealing legs that were strong and steady. She wasn't the gaunt, weeping girl they had photographed 5 years ago. "Ne Makul," the head of security, barked at the door. She recognized him. Marcus. He used to slip her extra desserts from the kitchen when Silas wasn't looking. Now. He looked at her with a mix of shock and pity. "Serafina Hart," she said, her voice cutting through the evening air. "And guests." Marcus's clipboard lowered slowly. Miss Hart. We weren't sure you'd actually come. The king invited me. Marcus, it would be rude to refuse." He hesitated, his eyes darting to Dominic, who stood like a stone golem beside her, and then down to Leo. Leo was holding Dominic's hand, looking at Marcus with an intensity that made the hardened guard take a half step back. "Who is the boy?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling slightly. "My son," she said simply. "Leo." Marcus didn't ask about the father. He simply swallowed hard and stepped aside. You may enter." Main ballroom. The doors to the ballroom were 12 feet high, made of mahogany and gold. Inside, the sound of a string quartet floated over the murmur of 300 guests. The elite of the werewolf world were here, alphas from neighboring territories, wealthy business magnates, and the high-ranking members of the Obsidian Pack. She took a deep breath. "Ready? Leo. Ready?" He squeaked. Dominic pushed the doors open. If the press line was a ripple, this was a tsunami of silence. As they stepped onto the mezzanine overlooking the dance floor, the conversation died instantly. The music faltered and stopped as the cellist noticed the room's attention shift. 300 heads turned upward. Serafina didn't look at the floor. She looked straight ahead, to the dais at the far end of the room. There, sitting on 2 high-backed velvet chairs, were Silas and Isabella. Silas looked older. He was 32 now, in the prime of his alpha strength. He wore a black tuxedo that strained against his shoulders, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He was holding a crystal glass of champagne, leaning back with an air of bored arrogance. Isabella sat beside him, glowing. She wore white, of course, a voluminous gown meant to symbolize purity and motherhood. In her arms, she held a bundle of lace. The heir. Lucas. Silas's eyes locked onto Seraphina's across the room. For a second, the world narrowed down to just them. She saw the shock register in his eyes. He hadn't expected the red dress. He hadn't expected the confidence. He had expected a broken woman in grey rags. Then, his gaze shifted to Dominic. His lip curled in a snarl that he quickly suppressed. Finally, he looked at Leo. From this distance, Leo was just a small, dark-haired boy clinging to a large man's leg. The scent-masking herbs she had rubbed into Leo's skin earlier were working. To Silas, Leo would smell like nothing more than a human child, or perhaps a faint beta wolf. Nothing to be alarmed by. Silas stood up. The movement was fluid, predatory. He whispered something to Isabella, who looked up, her eyes narrowing into slits as she spotted Seraphina. She clutched the baby tighter, a possessive, theatrical gesture. "Let's go say hello," Dominic rumbled. They descended the grand staircase. The crowd parted for them, creating a wide berth. Seraphina heard the whispers hissing like steam. "Is that her? The Barren one? She looks incredible. Who is the child did she adopt? Why is she with the rogue brother?" She kept her head high, her hand resting lightly on Leo's shoulder. They reached the bottom of the stairs and walked the length of the ballroom toward the throne. It felt like walking into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. When they stopped 10 feet from the dais, Silas descended the steps to meet them. He stopped mere inches from her, invading her personal space, using his alpha aura to try and force her into submission. It was a heavy, suffocating weight, like gravity increasing tenfold. 5 years ago, she would have dropped to her knees, baring her neck. Now she just stood there. Her wolf was wounded, but her mother's instinct was a shield stronger than any pack magic. "Seraphina," Silas said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated in her chest. "You came. You invited me. Silas, I assume you wanted to show me something." He smirked, swirling his drink. "I wanted you to see what success looks like. I wanted you to meet Lucas, my son." He gestured to Isabella, who stood up and walked down, the baby in her arms. She stopped beside Silas, looking Seraphina up and down with a sneer. "You look well, Seraphina," Isabella said, her voice dripping with fake honey. A bit provocative for a baby's naming ceremony. "But I suppose when you don't have a mate, you have to advertise." Seraphina smiled, cold and sharp. "And you look tired, Isabella. Motherhood must be exhausting when you're doing it alone." She saw Silas's jaw tighten. He hated not being the center of attention. "And who is this?" Silas asked, looking down at Leo. He didn't bend down. He looked at her son like one looks at a stray dog. "A charity case. Did you pick up a human orphan to fill the void?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. "This is Leo," she said. Leo looked up at Silas. He didn't cower. He didn't hide. He stared at the Alpha King with those impossible golden eyes. "Hello," Leo said clearly. Silas frowned. He stared into Leo's eyes, and for a fraction of a second, confusion flickered across his face. The eyes were familiar, too familiar, but the scent was wrong. He dismissed it. "Cute," Silas muttered dismissively. "Keep him quiet during the speeches. I won't have my son's moment ruined by some random brat." He turned his back on them, walking toward the microphone stand. "Take your seats. The ceremony is beginning." He thought he had won the interaction. He thought he had belittled her and dismissed her son. He had no idea that he had just insulted the only creature in the room powerful enough to challenge him. The guests shuffled into their seats. Dominic, Leo, and Serafina were directed to a table near the back, another calculated insult. But they didn't sit. They stood near a pillar, watching. The ceremony was extravagant. There were prayers to the moon goddess, blessings from the elders, and a parade of gifts that cost more than her flower shop. Through it all, the baby, Lucas, slept. Serafina watched the baby closely. He was a sweet thing, pale and small, but as an alpha female, even a rejected one, she could sense potential. And looking at Lucas, she felt nothing. No hum of power, no static electricity. He was a normal baby. A beta, perhaps, maybe even a gamma. But an alpha she didn't see it. Silas, however, was acting as if the child was Hercules reborn. Finally, it was time for the alpha's speech. Silas took the microphone, the spotlight hitting him, turning his dark hair to a halo. "My friends, family, and allies," Silas began, his voice booming through the speakers. "Tonight is not just about a name. It is about a legacy. For years, the Obsidian Pack lived in fear that the Blackwood line would end. We lived in the shadow of inadequacy." His eyes found Serafina in the back of the room, the spotlight operator, sensing the drama, swung a second beam of light onto her. She was blinded for a moment, isolated in a circle of white light. "Many of you know the struggle I faced," Silas continued, playing the victim. "I was bound to a mate who could not fulfill her one duty, a mate who was biologically broken." A gasp went through the room. It was one thing to gossip. It was another for the king to say it into a microphone. Dominic growled beside her, a low rumble that vibrated the floorboards. She put a hand on his arm to steady him. "Not yet." "I made the hard choice," Silas said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "I chose the pack over my heart. And tonight, the moon goddess has rewarded that sacrifice. Isabella has given me what Serafina never could. A true alpha heir." He raised his glass. "To Lucas Blackwood, the future king." "To the king," the crowd roared, though some voices were hesitant, looking back at Serafina with discomfort. Silas wasn't done. He was drunk on power and cruelty. "Serafina," he called out over the applause. "Come here." The room went dead silent. "Come," he commanded. "Come and bless the child. Show the pack that there are no hard feelings. Show them you acknowledge the true queen." It was a trap. If she refused, she looked bitter and weak. If she went up there, she was submitting to his narrative. She looked down at Leo. He was trembling, not from fear, but from anger. He didn't understand all the words, but he understood the tone. The bad man was hurting his mummy. "Stay here with Dominic," she whispered to Leo. "No," Leo said. His voice was different, deeper. "I go with you." She hesitated, then nodded. She took Leo's hand. They walked through the tables. The silence was so heavy, one could hear the rustle of her dress. She walked up the stairs to the dais. Silas stood there, a smug grin plastered on his face. Isabella clutched the baby, looking at Serafina with triumph. Serafina stopped in front of the microphone, Leo by her side. "You want a blessing?" "Silas?" she asked, her voice amplified by the mic, steady and cold. "I want you to admit the truth," Silas hissed, away from the mic, only for her to hear. "Admit you were useless." She turned to the crowd. She didn't look at Silas. "The Alpha speaks of legacy," she said, her voice ringing out. "He speaks of bloodlines and strength. He cast me out because a doctor told him I was empty. He threw me into the winter to die because he lacked the patience to wait for the moon goddess's timing. She felt a heat rising in her chest. Beside her, Leo was getting hot, physically hot. The scent-masking lotion was reacting to his rising body temperature, burning off. "How dare you?" Isabella started to squawk. "But the moon goddess doesn't make mistakes." Serafina continued, her voice rising. "And she doesn't let true kings be raised by cowards." She turned to Silas. "You wanted to see an heir, Silas. You wanted to see the Blackwood bloodline." She reached down and unclasped the velvet bow tie around Leo's neck. She ruffled his hair, disturbing the gel, letting his natural scent glands open up. "Leo," she said softly, "say hello to your father." The scent hit the air like a physical blow. It wasn't the smell of a child. It was the smell of a forest fire, cedar, ozone, and the overwhelming, crushing weight of Alpha Prime. It rolled off her 4-year-old son in waves, hitting the front row of the audience first. Alphas in the front row gasped, clutching their chests. It was the instinctual reaction to being in the presence of a superior predator. Silas dropped his champagne glass. It shattered, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He stared at Leo. He inhaled, his nostrils flaring. The scent was undeniable. It was his scent, mixed with Serafina's, but stronger, pure, undiluted. Leo stepped forward. He looked at Silas, his golden eyes beginning to glow with a faint, inner light. "You are mean," Leo said. His voice was amplified by the stunned silence of the room. "You made my mummy cry. And then, it happened." Leo growled. It wasn't a child's imitation of a growl. It was a guttural, vibrating sound that triggered the submission instinct in every wolf in the room. The baby in Isabella's arms, Lucas immediately started wailing, a high-pitched cry of distress. Lucas, the heir, was submitting to Leo. Silas stumbled back a step, his face draining of color. He looked from Leo to Serafina, and then back to Leo. The realization hit him like a freight train. "Impossible," Silas whispered, his hand shaking as he reached out toward the boy. You were Barren. I was pregnant when you threw me out," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You were just too busy looking for a replacement to notice the second heartbeat." She placed a hand on Leo's head, calming him. The oppressive pressure in the room lifted slightly, but the truth remained. "This is Leo," she announced to the frozen room, "the firstborn son, the true alpha heir. And we didn't come for your blessing, Silas. We came to show you exactly what you threw away." The crowd erupted. The silence following Serafina's declaration didn't last long. It broke with the sound of Isabella's screech. "Liar!" she screamed, her face contorted into a mask of ugly rage. She stood up, nearly dropping Lucas in her haste. "She's lying. Silas, it's a trick, a glamour spell. That brat is nothing but a mongrel she picked up off the street." The crowd murmured. The shock was wearing off, replaced by skepticism. After all, everyone knew the story Serafina was barren. Science had said so. Silas hadn't moved. He was still staring at Leo, his chest heaving. The glass shards crunched under his boots as he took a step toward them. "He has the eyes," Silas whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "He has the Blackwood eyes." "Eyes can be faked with contact lenses," Isabella yelled, marching down the steps to grab Silas's arm. Her nails dug into his tuxedo jacket. "Don't be a fool. Silas, she wants to ruin our night. She wants to steal the birthright of your son." "Lucas," at the mention of Lucas. Silas blinked, snapping out of his trance. He looked at the weeping bundle in Isabella's arms, weak, pale Lucas, and then at the sturdy, glowing boy holding Seraphina's hand. "There is only one way to be sure," Silas said, his voice hardening. He turned to the shadows of the stage. "Doctor, Sterling, get out here." Doctor, Sterling, the man who ruined Seraphina's life. He emerged from the side of the stage, looking pale and sweaty. He was an older wolf, greying and hunched. He carried a medical bag that he seemingly brought everywhere, or perhaps he had anticipated complications. "Alpha," Sterling stammered, bowing low. "Test the boy," Silas commanded. "Now, in front of everyone. But Alpha, the hygiene protocols." "Do it!" Silas roared. The force of his voice caused the chandeliers to rattle. 2 guards rushed forward, bringing a small table to the center of the dais. Seraphina didn't resist. She squeezed Leo's hand. "It's okay, Leo," she whispered. "Just a little pinch, like a mosquito." Leo nodded bravely. "I'm not scared." They stepped up to the table. Sterling's hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the lancet. He looked at Seraphina, and she saw pure terror in his eyes. He knew, if this test came back positive, his career and likely his life was over. "Both of you," Silas said, rolling up his own sleeve. "My blood against his." Sterling pricked Silas's finger first, letting 3 drops of dark crimson blood fall into a clear glass vial containing a reactive solution. The liquid turned a dull grey. Then he turned to Leo. "Hand, please!" Sterling squeaked. Leo held out his small hand. The needle pricked. 3 drops fell into the solution. The reaction was instantaneous. The moment Leo's blood hit Silas's in the solution, the liquid didn't just change color, it boiled, it hissed, and then a brilliant, luminescent gold light erupted from the vial, illuminating the terrified faces of the guests in the front row. Gold, the color of the pure Alpha bloodline, the color of kings. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It's a match," Sterling whispered, his voice cracking. "A perfect resonant match. 99.9% probability. He is your son, Alpha, and—" He hesitated, looking at the glowing vial. "His blood potency. It's higher than yours." Silas stared at the vial, mesmerized. The proof was undeniable. Then, slowly, he turned his head to look at Dr. Sterling. The look on Silas's face was terrifying. It was the calm before a massacre. "You told me she was barren," Silas said softly. "You told me her womb was hostile. You told me it was impossible. I... Sterling backed away, bumping into the podium. "Medical science isn't perfect. Alpha mistakes happen. Anomalies. Tell him the truth, Doctor." Seraphina cut in, her voice sharp. "Tell him about the deposit in your offshore account the week before my exam." Silas whipped his head toward her, then back to Sterling. Then his eyes slid to Isabella. Isabella went pale. "She's lying. Silas, she's trying to frame me." "I have the bank records." Seraphina lied. She didn't have them yet, but Dominic's hackers were working on it. But she didn't need the papers. She just needed to see their faces. Sterling cracked. He fell to his knees, sobbing. "She made me do it, Isabella. She said she would kill my mate. She said if I didn't falsify the records, she would have the rogue Pax hunt my family. Please, Alpha." The ballroom erupted into chaos. Silas stood frozen. The reality of the last 5 years crashed down on him. He hadn't rejected a Barren mate to save his pack. He had been manipulated into rejecting his fated mate and his true heir by a jealous rival. He turned to Isabella. "You." Isabella backed up, clutching Lucas like a shield. "I did it for you. She wasn't fit to be queen. She was weak. I gave you a son." Silas looked at Lucas, the baby who was still crying, overwhelmed by the alpha energy in the room. Then he looked at Leo, who stood stoic and strong. "You gave me a lie," Silas snarled. He turned back to Seraphina. The anger in his eyes vanished, replaced by a desperate, hungry look. He took a step toward her, reaching out a hand. "Seraphina," he breathed. "My mate, my son." He thought he could just fix it. He thought the truth washed away the sins. She slapped his hand away. The sound echoed through the room. "Don't touch us," she hissed. "Seraphina, I didn't know," Silas pleaded, looking frantic. "I was tricked. We can fix this. You are the true queen. Leo is the heir. We can be a family again." "A family," she laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You threw me out like garbage. Silas, you didn't double-check. You didn't seek a second opinion. You didn't fight for me. You just replaced me." "I am the king," Silas roared, his temper fraying as embarrassment set in. "I made a strategic decision based on the information I had, and now I am making a new one. You will not leave. That boy is pack property." Dominic stepped forward, placing his massive frame between Silas and Seraphina. "Try it, brother," Dominic growled, "and I'll turn this celebration into a funeral." The tension in the ballroom was thick enough to choke on. The guests were pressed against the walls, terrified but unable to look away. This was history in the making, or a royal tragedy. Silas glared at Dominic. "Stand down, rogue. You have no authority here." "I have the authority of a mostly sane uncle," Dominic deadpanned, "which is more than you have right now." Silas looked past him to Seraphina. "Seraphina, be reasonable. Look at the boy. He is an alpha. He needs to be trained. He needs to be raised in the pack, on these lands. You cannot raise a king in a flower shop." "I've done a hell of a better job than you would have," she retorted. "He knows how to be kind. He knows how to share. He doesn't think power gives him the right to crush people. He belongs to the Obsidian Pack," Silas shouted, his eyes flashing red at the sign of his wolf surfacing. "By pack law, all alpha offspring must be presented to the council and raised within the territory. You cannot take him." "Watch me," she said. She grabbed Leo's hand. "We're leaving." "Guards," Silas commanded. "Seize them. Do not harm the boy or the woman, but do not let them leave the floor." The security team, led by Marcus, hesitated. They looked at their king, then at the glowing boy who smelled like an ancient god, and then at Dominic. "Marcus," Silas barked. "That is a direct order." Marcus winced but stepped forward. "I'm sorry, Luna. Please, don't make us fight." "I'm not your Luna," she said. Before Marcus could reach them, Dominic moved. He didn't shift into his wolf form, he didn't need to. He moved with the brutal efficiency of a mercenary. He swept Marcus's legs, sending the head of security crashing to the marble floor, and punched the second guard in the throat. Chaos erupted. Women screamed. Men shouted. "Get to the exit!" Dominic yelled at her, blocking a third guard. Seraphina scooped Leo up. He was heavy, dense with muscle, but adrenaline gave her strength and ran toward the side doors. "No!" Silas roared. He leaped over the table, shifting mid-air. It was a terrifying sight. One moment he was a man. The next, the sound of bones cracking filled the air, and a massive midnight black wolf 10 feet long, and pure muscle landed on the floor with a snarl. He bounded toward her, ignoring his guests, ignoring his crying wife. He was a missile locked onto his target. She reached the door, but 2 more guards blocked it. She was trapped. Silas, in his wolf form, landed between Serafina and Dominic. He snarled at Dominic, snapping his massive jaws, then turned his amber eyes on her. He didn't attack. He paced back and forth, blocking her path, growling low in his throat. It was a herding behavior. He was corralling them. Mine. His voice echoed in her head via the mind link. The bond she thought was dead flickered to life. You are mine. He is mine. I will not let you go again. Get out of my head, she screamed, clutching her temples. Leo, seeing the giant black wolf threatening his mother, wriggled out of her arms. Leo, no, she cried. Leo stood before the Alpha King. The size difference was comical, a 4-year-old boy against a monster. But Leo didn't back down. He stomped his little foot. Bad dog, Leo yelled. The room went silent again. Leo closed his eyes, and a wave of power blasted outward. It wasn't just a scent this time. It was a telekinetic shove, a manifestation of raw, uncontrolled alpha spirit. The force of it hit Silas. The giant wolf was actually shoved backward, his paws skidding on the marble. He whined in surprise. Then, a booming voice echoed from the balcony above. Enough! We all froze. Looking up, she saw 3 elderly men in grey robes descending the stairs. The Council of Elders. They rarely left the sanctuary, but for the naming ceremony, they had been present. Elder Thomas, the oldest and wisest, slammed his staff onto the ground. Silas Blackwood, Thomas intoned, his voice shaking with age and anger. Shift back, now. Silas hesitated, looking at Serafina, then at the elders. He couldn't disobey the council without risking a civil war. With a shuddering crack, he shifted back into human form, naked and breathing hard. A guard quickly threw a cloak over him. You disgrace this pack, Elder Thomas spat, brawling like common curs at a sacred ceremony. She is stealing my air, Silas panted, pointing at her. She hid him for 4 years. She protected him, Dominic shouted, stepping up beside her, wiping blood from his lip. She protected him from your toxicity and your snake of a wife. The truth has been revealed tonight, Elder Thomas said, looking at Dr. Sterling, who was currently being restrained by guards. A great crime has been committed against Serafina Hart. The rejection was based on fraud. Therefore, under ancient law, the rejection is null and void. Serafina's stomach dropped. No, I don't want it voided. I don't want him. It is not about what you want, child, Thomas said sadly. It is about the law. However, he looked at Silas. Silas, you have also committed a grave error. You took a new mate and sired another child while your true mate lived, and you attempted to attack the mother of the heir. I want custody, Silas demanded. The boy stays. The boy is young, Elder Thomas said, and the mother is unwilling. The elder looked between them. There is a conflict of claim. Silas claims the right of the father and king. Serafina claims the right of the protector. There is only one way to settle this without tearing the pack apart. A trial? Silas asked, smirking. He knew he controlled the courts. No, Elder Thomas said firmly. A challenge of the moon. Not a physical fight, Silas would slaughter you. Serafina. And we know it. This will be the trial of the wilds. She felt a chill run down her spine. The trial of the wilds was an ancient, barbaric tradition. You will both be stripped of resources, the elder declared. You will be dropped into the northern barrens, the most dangerous territory in our lands. You have 3 days to reach the sacred stone at the peak of Mount Onyx. Whoever reaches the stone first, with their spirit unbroken, wins full custody of the child and dictates the terms of the pack's future. I accept, Silas said immediately. He was the alpha. He was a hunter. He survived in the wild for sport. He thought this was an easy win. And if I refuse, she asked, then you forfeit the child immediately, and you will be exiled permanently. Thomas said, Leo will remain here with Silas and Isabella. She looked at Isabella, who was watching with a look of pure venom. She looked at Silas, who looked triumphant. Then she looked at Leo. She would walk through hell for him. I accept, she said, her voice steady. Good, Elder Thomas said. The trial begins at dawn. Until then, the boy remains in the custody of the council. Neutral ground. Mommy, Leo whimpered, sensing the separation. It's okay, baby, she said, tears finally spilling over as she hugged him tight. I'm going to play a game, and when I win, we're going home. I promise. As the guards took Leo away, Silas leaned in close to her. You can't beat me in the wild, Sarah, he whispered. I was born for the hunt. You arrange flowers. Give up now, and I'll let you visit him on weekends. She looked him dead in the eye. You forgot one thing, Silas. What's that? A mother wolf is the only thing in the woods more dangerous than an alpha. She turned and walked away with Dominic. She had 12 hours to prepare to hunt the king. The air in the northern barrens was cold enough to freeze breath in the lungs. At dawn, Silas and Seraphina stood at the edge of the forbidden forest. They were given simple supplies, a knife, a canteen of water, and heavy furs. No technology, no outside help. The goal was Mount Onyx, a jagged peak visible in the distance, shrouded in mist. Ready to lose? Silas asked. He stripped off his furs immediately, handing them to a stunned guard. He didn't need them. He intended to shift and run. A wolf in this terrain could reach the peak in 6 hours. A human would take 2 days. Just go, Silas, Seraphina said, adjusting her boots. The elder dropped his hand. Begin. Silas didn't hesitate. He shifted mid-stride, the massive black wolf exploding into the tree line. He didn't look back. He was running for his pride, for his crown. He disappeared into the white abyss of the snow-covered forest. Seraphina didn't run. She couldn't outrun a wolf. She began to walk, finding a rhythm. She knew something Silas didn't. She had spent her years in exile studying the maps of the region, planning for a day she might have to escape through these mountains. She knew the direct path was a suicide mission of loose shale and avalanche risks. Silas would take the direct path because he was arrogant. She took the long way, winding through the valley floor. By midday, the silence of the woods was broken by a howl. It wasn't a howl of triumph. It was a howl of pain. It came from the ridge above her, the direct path. She hesitated. Her goal was the stone. If Silas was hurt, that was his problem. He was the king. He could handle himself. She took a step forward, intending to ignore it. But then the wind shifted, carrying a scent down the mountain. It wasn't just Silas's blood. It was the scent of rogue wolves. And not just any rogues. She smelled the cloying, artificial perfume that Isabella wore. It was faint, clinging to the fur of an attacker. Isabella hadn't just relied on Seraphina losing. She had hired hitmen to make sure neither of them came back. If Silas died, she would be the queen regent for her son. Lucas. Damn it, Serafina cursed. She veered off her path and began to climb. When she reached the ridge, the snow was stained red. Silas in his giant wolf form was cornered against a cliff face. 3 grey, mangy wolves were snapping at his hamstrings. He was bleeding heavily from a gash in his shoulder. He was fighting fiercely, but he was tired, and the altitude was slowing him down. One of the rogues lunged for Silas's throat while he was distracted by another. She didn't think. She pulled the hunting knife from her belt. "Hey!" she screamed. The rogues turned. They hadn't expected a human. "Get away from him!" The closest rogue snarled and charged her. She didn't try to fight him strength for strength. She dropped to her knees in the snow, letting him fly over her, and thrust the knife upward. It buried deep into the soft underbelly. The rogue yelped and collapsed, writhing. Silas, seeing the opening, surged forward. He crushed the skull of the second wolf with his jaws and swiped the third one over the cliff edge. Silence returned to the mountain. Silas shifted back. He was naked, shivering, and bleeding. He looked at her with wide, shocked eyes. He looked at the dead rogue, then at the knife in her hand. "You," he rasped. "You came back. You could have won." "Isabella sent them," she said, wiping the blade on the snow. "She wants you dead, Silas. She wants the throne for herself." Silas looked at the dead rogue. He saw the mark of a mercenary pack, known to trade with Isabella's father. His face crumbled. The betrayal was absolute. "I can't." "My leg." Silas groaned. The hamstring was torn. He couldn't run. He certainly couldn't climb. He looked at her, defeated. "Go. Finish it. I can't make it." She looked at the peak. Then she looked at the man who had ruined her life, shivering in the snow. "Get up," she said. "What?" I said, "Get up. We're finishing this. Together." "Why?" he whispered. "I destroyed you. Because a true alpha doesn't leave their pack behind," she said. "Even the members they hate." It took them another day. She had to support his weight. They froze together in a cave that night, sharing body heat not out of love, but out of necessity. They didn't speak of the past. They just survived. On the morning of the 3rd day, they reached the final ascent. The sacred stone sat on a plateau, bathed in sunlight. They limped onto the flat ground. The council was there, waiting via helicopter transport, along with a medical team. They expected one survivor. They didn't expect them to walk in arm, battered and bloody. They stopped 10 feet from the stone. Silas let go of her shoulder. He stood on his good leg, swaying slightly. He looked at the stone, then at her. "Go," he said softly. "What?" "Touch it." Silas said. "I forfeit." She stared at him. "You were right. Serafina," he said, his voice breaking. "You were the queen I needed. I was too blind to see it. You saved me when I deserved to die. You are the alpha. Not me." He knelt in the snow. He bowed his head. She walked past him. She placed her hand on the sacred stone. It flared with a blinding white light, signaling the acceptance of the new leader. "The winner is Serafina Hart," Elder Thomas announced, his voice echoing over the peaks. They returned to the estate not as exes, but as a conqueror and her prisoner. They burst into the main hall. Isabella was sitting on the throne, wearing black, already playing the grieving widow. When she saw Silas limp in, alive, her face went white. "Seize her," Silas commanded. His voice was weak, but his authority was absolute. Guards grabbed Isabella before she could run. "You tried to kill your king," Silas spat. "You hired rogues. It's over. Isabella!" Isabella screamed and cursed as she was dragged away to the dungeons. Her son, Lucas, was taken by the nannies. He would be raised by the pack, innocent of his mother's crimes. But he would never be king. Then, the room turned to Serafina. She stood in the center of the ballroom, still wearing her torn furs, her hair matted with blood. Leo ran to her, burying his face in her legs. She picked him up, holding him tight. Silas approached her. He had been patched up by the medics. He looked humble for the first time in his life. He took a small velvet box from his pocket, the Queen's ring. "Serafina," he said, dropping to one knee in front of hundreds of witnesses. "I have no right to ask, but forgive me. Take your place by my side. Let us raise Leo together. Let us be the family we were meant to be." The room held its breath. It was the fairy tale ending, the king groveling, the family reunited. Serafina looked at Silas. She looked at his handsome face, the regret in his eyes. She felt the tug of the bond, whispering that he was sorry, that he loved her. But then she remembered the rain. She remembered the motel rooms. She remembered the years of loneliness while he played house with Isabella. Trust is like a mirror. You can fix it if it's broken, but you can still see the crack in that motherfucker's reflection. "I forgive you, Silas," she said softly. Hope lit up his eyes. He went to slide the ring on her finger. She pulled her hand back. "I forgive you for my own peace," she said, her voice strengthening. "But I do not want you." Silas froze. "Sarah." "I am the Alpha now," she said, addressing the crowd. "I won the trial. I dictate the terms." She looked down at him. "My terms are these: I will serve as Alpha Regent until Leo comes of age. You, Silas, will step down. You will serve as the general of the armies. You will protect this pack. You will train our son in combat, but you will never sit on that throne again, and you will never share my bed again." Silas stared at her. He saw the steel in her eyes. He realized that the soft girl he rejected was dead. He had killed her. Slowly, he lowered his head. He closed the ring box. "As you command. My Alpha," he whispered. 6 months later. The floral shop in Seattle was closed now. Serafina lived in the Alpha quarters of the Blackwood estate. She was writing this from her office. Outside the window, she could see the training grounds. Leo was 5 now. He was shifting for the first time today. Silas was down there with him, patient and proud, teaching him how to control the wolf. They had a relationship. That was enough. Serafina didn't get the fairy tale romance. She got something better. She got her dignity. She got her son. And she got the crown. They called her the rejected mate, the Barren wolf. Now they just call her Queen. And that is how Serafina Hart went from a rejected exile to the queen of the most powerful pack in the nation. She didn't need a Prince Charming to save her. She needed a knife, a plan, and the unbreakable love for her son. Silas spent the rest of his life trying to earn back a love he threw away. But some doors, once closed, never open again. What do you think? Did Serafina make the right choice by rejecting Silas at the end, or should she have given him a second chance for the sake of a happy family? I know what I would have done. But I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, justice, and wolf-shifter drama, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next part of our Alpha series. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next story.